the Hoka Speedgoat 5 are one of the most popular and the most used running shoes in trail running and ultra running. Chances are, if you're a trail runner or an ultra runner, you've at least given these shoes some thought. But is the hype justified? Call me a late bloomer, but I finally decided that I would give them a spin. I used them for 3 ultra marathon: Zion 100 mile, Fuji 100 mile, and Cocodona 250 mile. That's 450 miles of testing. 2 different pair of shoes. I've shred them to piece, and today I'm going to give you my opinion about the Hoka Speedgoat 5. Hey, Simon here. Welcome to my channel. I'm an ultra runner with 4,100 miler under my belt. On this channel, you'll have race recap of me racing a 100-mile ultra marathon on average every month, as well as training tips. But today we're doing something a little different. Today we're doing a gear review. And this channel is not really a gear review channel, but I have a few of them because I feel that I have a lot of experience and I want to communicate this experience and my opinion about some of the gear. And just like any gear review that I do on this channel, what I try to do with my video is not necessarily going through the specs. You're able to go on the website and there's other shoe review that you can listen to if you want to see how many millimeters and how many grams or ounce the shoe is. But really what I'm doing is an experiment, testing it on trail, putting a lot of mileage on them, shredding them to piece. Let's go. It's time to test the Hoka Speedgoat 5. I really use them as my primary shoe for 3 big race, 3 big ultra marathon, which I think is a lot of volume in terms of putting on these shoes. I did Zion 100 mile, I did Mount Fuji 100 mile, and I did Cocodona 250 mile. And I think something that's important to mention here is that my goal was not only to put a lot of mileage on these shoes, but also there's a wide variety of trails and different types of terrains and technicality that I use these shoes for, so that I can really see the full spectrum of what they can do, what they're good at, and what they're not necessarily the best shoes at. And spoiler alert, I really like these shoes. They're definitely going to be in my normal rotation, but I'm not going to use them for every single race, and I have some specific reason, and I'm going to go through that during this review. And towards the end, I'm going to say exactly what type of trail I would use these shoes for, and what type of trail I would personally not use these shoes for. The Hoka Speedgoat 5s are trail running shoes, which means that they have really good grip. But what they're mostly known for is their big ass cushion. It's gonna be like running on clouds, which is great. And for me, testing these shoes as opposed to some other pair of shoes, I really felt that it was almost an hybrid between a trail running shoe and a road running shoe, and taking some of the best aspect of a road running shoe and also some important aspect of a trail running shoe. But sometimes you have to compromise. And Hoka really designed these shoes specifically for long distance running, which is why I think it's so popular in the trail and ultra running community. If you go at any race, a lot of people will be using them. And if you have Hoka Speedgoat 5, you're gonna be one of the cool kid too. And you're gonna be able to go to people and say, represent. So it felt weird for me to not have the shoe with me, and I have 2 pairs. But they're already pretty shred to piece. Actually, I don't know if we'll be able to see it. Yeah, as you can see, there's basically no tread anymore on this shoe specifically. So I really used it a lot. And that's usually a good sign. If I use the shoe to the point where I cannot use it anymore, it's because I really enjoyed these shoes. And I think that's really important to mention is these shoes felt great. These shoes felt absolutely fantastic. So what did I like about the Hoka Speedgoat 5? Well, first, I really like the look. I mean, it's not just about being cool, but I think they're pretty rad in terms of color. You have a lot of different choice. I know this should not be super important, but I think it does matter to some extent. It's matching your style and your personality. But if we talk about the shoe itself and what really matters, the first thing is that they're relatively light for a trail running shoe. I think just if you take kind of the fabric on the top, it's decently breathable. It's not the most breathable material that I've ever had. Some, especially road running shoe, the fabric can be a lot thinner and be much more breathable. So this, in the heat of the desert, your feet will get a little sweaty. But if I compare to other trail running shoes and some shoes that are sometimes a little bit more rigid, it's actually decent in terms of how much it's breathing. And the shoe itself is not necessarily that heavy. It's not the lightest. Obviously, you know, you have a big cushion like that, but it's actually very reasonable. And structure-wise, it's decently flexible. So when you think about trail running shoes, you definitely have a gradient of shoes that are pretty malleable and some shoes that are very stiff, very hard. And there's obviously advantages to both. And this shoe personally, I think, is very malleable, which means that your movement is a little bit more fluid, and that comes also with the midsole. It's very responsive. It's almost bouncy, so you're bouncing forward, and when you land on a big cushion. It's very comfortable. So the shoe is very responsive, and also the impact is very much minimized. And if we look down there at the outsole or kind of the tread, it's actually a tread that I really like. Maybe this shoe is not a good example. Let's go with this one that there's still a little bit left. And these are very grippy, very grippy. And if we look, for example, I race Fuji 100 mile. It's a very technical course, a lot of roots, a lot of mud. It's very steep, it's very rocky sometimes. You're basically rock climbing. Sometimes it's gonna be wet, it's gonna be slippery. And I really felt the difference using these shoes for that race. The grip that I had was exactly what I was looking for, and that provided me the confidence on the downhill to attack the downhill a little bit more and be less at risk of sliding or falling down. It was muddy, but I was not carrying that much mud on my shoes. Sometimes when the tread gets very big and very aggressive, it feels you're carrying like 2 pounds of mud with your feet, and this was not doing that. So I was very appreciative of that, of finding the balance of something that was very grippy. At the same time, if you take a race like Zion, it was much more rocky, and over there the cushioning was very good to absorb the shock. I would feel a little bit towards the end my feet, you know, the underneath there's no metal plate, but I think for 100 mile, it was a very reasonable feeling of how you were connecting with the trail. But the main thing that I really liked about these shoes, that really is the main reason why they will definitely be part of my normal running shoe rotation, especially for long distance race, is they do this, I don't know how to call that, but the back of the feet, you have this kind of angle for where your ankle would be, or your Achilles. And if you follow my channel, one of the recurring problem and recurring injury that I have is Achilles tendonitis, and it just becomes very sore. It's not a problem on a day-to-day basis or when I go for a 20-mile run, but when I do a 100-mile, my Achilles get extremely swollen. It's extremely painful, and very often the main reason I'm not able to run anymore and I need to switch to power hiking is because of my Achilles. And using this, it's really reducing the amount of pressure that you get on your Achilles because of the angle. Instead of digging into your heel, when you're stepping, it's kind of, and it's much more gentle. So that's a very big plus, and it basically resolved my Achilles problem. And it's not just me, I've heard from other people, so I don't know that it's necessarily only that, but it's definitely been a factor. Both the cushioning for the heel, but also the back of the heel is very helpful. And Nora, for example, has a lot of problem with trail running shoes in general, because trail running shoes tend to be stiffer because they need to protect your feet. But because they're stiffer and the back of the feet will, in the end, even if it's straight, will kind of dig a little bit in your Achilles, she has a lot of problem too. Well, same thing with her. She really liked her Speedgoat 5. Before we dive any deeper, as you know, gear review is not necessarily my thing, so I apologize if the structure is all over the place. But if you think it's helpful to have someone use the gear on trail for a lot of mile to really see the different scenarios of how a shoe or specific gear would react and how durable they are. If you think this video is helpful, please leave a thumbs up. In terms of affiliation with Hoka, they did not provide the shoes. Hopefully next time they provide me some shoes, but these one I bought by myself. They were on discount, so I felt it's the time to test the Speedgoat 5. I do have an affiliate link in the description below. So if you appreciate this video, if you think these shoes are shoes that would match with your type of running, with your type of racing, and you want to try them out, please consider using the affiliate link. Thank you so much. But of course, why don't we move to what I don't like about these shoes, or not necessarily that I don't like, but it's why they're not perfect shoes, and no shoes are perfect. And we need to actually start with this heel thing. Why are not every shoes like that? Well, there's quite a lot of reason, right? But the main reason, especially for a trail running shoe, and usually that's something that you see much more on road running shoes. And what's the difference between a road and a trail? It's all of the crap. It's all of the little pedal, the little branch, the little twigs that, because it's like this, it's almost doing a funnel and you get a lot of crap in there. So it's not a deal breaker for me. I think the solution here is pretty simple, and a lot of people are already doing that. The solution is that you should probably use gaiters. If you use gaiters, it's gonna kind of block this funnel that gets all the crap in your shoes, because yes, I was getting a lot of crap in these shoes in all of my races. The other thing that I want to mention about this shoe is that it is relatively light and it is relatively flexible compared to other trail running shoes. As I said, there's a gradient in terms of stiffness and breathability. And that comes with the disadvantage of being very or decently breathable. I feel, for example, the tongue here is kind of flimsy a little bit. It's not the most comfortable. But very importantly, is for me, it's the front of the shoe. So there is some protection for your toes, but it's not that strong. It's not kind of a metal plate, and it really covers a little bit. So if you run a race that is very rocky, but you know, kind of baseball size rocks that you're likely gonna hit them with your feet, and the race that I can think of that is pretty obvious for me is Bryce Canyon 100 mile, which I did not use these shoes. And one of the main reasons is that I knew there would be rocks, I knew I would be kicking these rocks, and I knew that would really hurt my toes. So if it's a race that is maybe more in the desert and it's that kind of terrain, I need to be a little bit more careful about these shoes. If we still talk about toes and toes protection, the other thing that I would really mention is I don't typically have issue with my toes being too tight in shoes. You know, there's definitely this trend in trail runners where you want to have a very wide toe box. And I think that's a very good thing to say. And for a lot of people, it will resolve issues like blisters. Usually I take normal shoes, but for the Hoka Speedgoat, I use the normal shoes, and they have also the wide model. And I think that's not how they should call it. They should call the normal model narrow and the wide model normal. Of course, I don't necessarily recommend that you take the wide shoe without trying. I would recommend that you go to a shoe store and you try different models. But that's a comment that you'll hear very, very often, is that they tend to be a little narrower than your typical shoe. And that's something to know, because that little narrower, what that means is that your little pinky will likely be rubbing or pressed against your other toes in an uncomfortable position. And for me, that led to pretty bad blisters. And I had pretty bad blisters at Cocodona, which here's a picture. But I also had blisters on my pinkies when I race Zion. So it's not an issue that I ever have with any of the other shoes I have. And it's just because the toe box is too little and not protected enough. So now that I know that I need to take the wide one. Finally, the last thing I would say is, look, I ran 500 miles with 2 pair of shoes, and the red ones are still decent. I think I could still do a 100-miler on them. So in terms of durability, they're decent, but I could already see the difference after I raced Zion 100 mile, which I did Zion 100 mile with this pair specifically, and then I did Fuji with this pair again specifically, and I could really tell the difference. Despite the fact that Fuji, the trail was much more muddy and a little softer, it should have been easier on my heel, but already the cushioning, I could really tell that it was not as good as it was before. So the first 100 mile were much better, and already the cushioning was not as great. And towards the end of the race, you can tell the tread are basically gone. So they were still decently good to carry me and not be slippery, but I think if I would repeat another race, I wouldn't get the grip that I'm looking for. So in terms of durability, it's kind of in between. I feel that the 200 mile-ish that I put on them, they were pretty shred to piece already. You can run more with them, but you lose a lot of the advantage as to why you got Speedgoats in the first place. And maybe it's me being picky. You know, I was hoping that the shoes would last a little longer, especially that they're meant for long distance running. But at the same time, I guess 200 to 300 mile is probably what you should put on a pair of running shoes.
All right.
So in conclusion, Hoka Speedgoat 5, are they overhyped?
How y'all doing up there? Y'all doing all right?
Yeah. Should we believe the hype?
What hype?
The hype about Booby Miles.
No, hype is something that's not for real. I'm all real.
I don't think they're overhyped. I think they're great shoes. They definitely fit within my shoe rotation. For me, just the fact that it's gonna resolve my Achilles problem, it's that's definitely kind of, yeah, you're in for the future. Similarly, I think that the grip was very good, but I'm not gonna use that all the time. I think for me, the way I'm gonna use these shoes, or when I'm gonna use these shoes, first of all, not in training run. Most of my training run, I don't use fancy shoes like that. I'm gonna reserve them for long distance ultra marathon, and more specifically, I'm gonna focus on races that the main issue or the main technicality is not necessarily these kind of fist-sized rocks and things that I can bump into. So I'm not going to use my Hoka Speedgoat 5 for a race like Javelina 100, but I'm going to use them for trail, especially if it's muddy, especially if I know it's technical, but not because I'm going to bump my toes all the time. So a race like Fuji was actually perfect for that. In other races that I would be thinking of using these shoes, I'm thinking about Hurt 100. So basically races that are technical, that you need a good grip, that you need good cushioning, but at the same time, you're not too worried about your toe protection. Some mud, or it's slippery, or it's wet, and I think this is the perfect use for these shoes. The last thing I would say is that I think they're decently breathable, but not the most breathable shoes. So if I'm racing a race in the desert, I think I would anyway want to have a shoe, maybe even a road running shoe, because I don't need something for technical running. I just need something for long distance running, and I need something that is very light, very breathable, and these shoes might not be the good fit for that. But do I like these shoes? 100%. I hope this review was helpful. It's my opinion after running with them more than 500 miles. If you appreciate this video, please leave a thumbs up, and see you next time.